Welcome back to the latest edition of the Outdated Entertainment Hour. I'm your Master of Ceremonies, Bob Thorpe. In this edition, special guest Brian R. Solomon and Steve Gennarelli join Bob Smith to look at magazines that aren't around anymore. Oh, I pine for those days myself. Finally, a topic I can sink my teeth into. Photo play back in the day. Oh, it was full of Hollywood gossip and the biggest stars. My favorite edition was the October 1976 issue. And it were a couple of my favorite articles of all time. Marty Feldman, My Face is My Fortune. And another article, King Kong, he's top banana in New York. And I remember... Oh, never mind. You Philistines wouldn't be into it anyway. It's the Outdated Entertainment Hour. You, up there, a little bit handsy, fellow. Just watch the show. Hello once again, this is Bob Smith, and welcome back to another monthly edition of the Outdated Entertainment Hour. How are you today? We have a couple of your favorite guests are back, a couple of media mavens, writer and journalist Brian R. Solomon, and the famed podcaster Steve Gennarelli. And together we're going to talk about, well, old magazines. Most of them defunct, most of them aren't around anymore. But we're going to take a loving look back at the days when a stack of magazines next to your bed table was just about the best thing you could have. They weren't expensive. They were informative and fun. I miss magazines. And I think a lot of you might miss just the joy of going and picking up your favorite magazines every week or every month. So hang on there. Get yourself a Yoo-Hoo. Get yourself a Hot Toddy. Get yourself Diet Shasta. And hunker in. We're going to have a fun conversation about, well, the magazines we all grew up reading here on the Outdated Entertainment Hour. First, here's a rock and roller who never goes out of style. Who could it be?
This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/What is ham radio? See you on the air.
Welcome back, everybody. I am one lucky guy because I've been surrounded the last 3 years by some really smart, really talented people, and I have two of them back on the show today. Our highest rated show here was our Star Trek episode that both of these gentlemen took part in. And we should probably follow that episode up, to come to think of it. But in any event, here is Steve Gennarelli. Steve, welcome back.
It's great to be back. Great to be here with you and Brian again.
And, of course, congratulations to a person who recently wrote a #1 on Amazon book in his genre. It's Brian R. Solomon. Welcome back, Brian.
Thank you. Happy to be here, and happy to say that it's been in the top 10 for the last 3 months. Number one for 2 weeks, so I'm very excited.
Tell them about the book. I know this is not the wrestling show, but it's such a good book. And it really is an examination of a man's life as much as it is a wrestling historical book. Just tell them all about it, if you'd be so kind.
Sure. Well, the book is Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, and it tells the story of Bob Gino Marella, who was known professionally as Gorilla Monsoon, who at one point was 25% owner of the company that's now known as WWE, kind of a founding father of the company, as well as being a major wrestling star and a wrestling commentator during the whole Hulkamania era of the WWF. So fondly remembered. And I tell not only the story of his life, but because it's the life and times, also the story of the development of the WWF from a territorial company into a national and international powerhouse.
It's a great book, too. He won't say that, but I will. You agree with that, Steve?
It's the best wrestling book I've ever read, honestly.
Wow. Okay. Well, I thank you I heard your show where you talked about we talked about that, where your favorite wrestling books, and I was honored that you mentioned that one as well as Blood and Fire on, it's such high regard.
Yes, I feel the same exact way. And most people I know feel the same exact way. So we ain't
there's
alone.
A couple of people on Amazon who disagree, but that's okay.
That's fine.
Yeah,
that's fine. I had even my other podcast got a meh review from somebody on Apple Podcasts. You got to take the good with the bad. It's like you can't please everybody.
No.
You just can't. So anyway, this particular edition, Steve and Brian and I are going to talk about old magazines, defunct magazines they do not publish anymore. Stuff that we read growing up, obviously, into our adult years in many cases. And with the demise of print publishing, some very, very good publications have gone by the wayside. And I'll start with Brian on this one. Were you as voracious a magazine reader in your formative years as I was? Because like I told you earlier before we hit the record button, I stopped buying toys around 12 or 13, and I started collecting magazines. It was my main jam. How about you?
Oh, yeah. I got into comic books when I was about 10, and I'm trying to think. Magazines were probably when I was, by the time I was about 12, I was big into reading magazines. And of course, growing up in Brooklyn, there's a newsstand on every corner. You can just walk down the block. I had one of those newsstands where if you grow up in the city, like they didn't even have names. It would just be like the brand of a cigar that they sold. Like mine, it was Optimo, just a giant Optimo sign. Like that was just the name of the newsstand. And I would go there every week and buy comic books and magazines, were next, because the magazine racks were right next to the comics. So I guess that's how I started, taking notice and being interested in things that I wanted to read about and, stuff like that. So yeah, definitely. For me, it's, I guess, like late 80s all the way through till when the internet started. And then like everybody else, I never went away from magazines because I worked in magazines, but I definitely started reading them less because there was so much stuff you can get on the web.
Does that work for a lot of people? And I'll have you know, my friend, the Optimo thing, right in my neighborhood to this day. Right in my neighborhood. This is a place. I don't know what the place is called. They just have the big Optimo sign.
I don't think it had a name. It didn't have a name. It was just the newsstand,
Yeah, but you know what the problem is now? Because it's 2025, they took the magazines out of there.
Well, that's been one of the most depressing things is there's places, we all know that, where you used to get magazines and they're gone. CVS has the tiniest little rack, and there's probably not long for there. And the Stop and Shop grocery stores, which here in New England, they used to have a beautiful magazine section. Now they're revamping all their stores, and magazines and books no longer included. What's the other one that? Oh man, there used to be even Hudson News. Now they don't even call it Hudson News anymore. It's just called Hudson. And if you go in there now, it's like it's mostly other stuff with a couple of magazine racks. That's happening everywhere.
So basically, it's a chapstick store with a few magazines now.
Yeah,
right?
It's just candy. No, you're right. It's candy, snacks, drinks, and a couple of magazine racks. There was a great one here in Connecticut in Norwalk, which we used to go to on our lunch breaks at WWE because we were all magazine people. We'd go and check stuff out. The entire thing was wall-to-wall magazines, every wall. And I went in there recently, and there's just no magazines, not even cut down, nothing. The entire store was built around selling magazines, and they had to pivot, otherwise go out of business.
It's amazing. Steve, give us some memories of how you got into magazines and how old you were. And were you like us in that, when you hit your mid-teens or so, your taste started to change and you started to go toward periodicals?
Well, I was similar to Brian in that in the early 70s when I was a smaller kid, probably like third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, maybe. I was like really into Marvel Comics. That was really a big deal. But I mean, as a younger kid, even when I was like in the kindergarten, first grade age, that was when Dark Shadows was on the air, and I was rushing out and buying like a daytime TV magazine just to see pictures of Barnabas in the magazine. And but anyhow, I got big into Marvel Comics, and then when Marvel Comics just kind of wore off on me, that's kind of when I discovered wrestling right around 1976. And of course, in my house, we had a big. Our house was all sports all the time. My dad was huge into the Yankees. My brother was into the Yankees, the Giants, the Rangers, and the Knicks. And I mean, we even had a Yankee Stadium scoreboard in our basement, which was kind of our room. And he had like in the basement, he had all the covers of Sports Illustrated on the walls, and as my brother. And but we were buying magazines like crazy, and me with the wrestling, because wrestling was such a mystery, you had to buy the magazines to try to understand more about it. And with the baseball and the hockey and the football, we just loved all those sports too. And I mean, we had all the Yankee yearbooks like stacked up to the roof practically, because we would go to the stadium, we would buy these things. We would buy the media guides. We had all those. So I mean, getting these periodicals was just a part of life, and you felt incomplete if you didn't have these things.
Absolutely agree. It was my main jam. And I think my love of magazines really made me a good magazine guy when I got into the business, because it's like, that was my jam. You kind of pick up formatting and you pick up style points and, the way magazines are written. And it was when I joined, my first magazine was easy even after being in, no, let me take that back. When I first joined the wrestling boxing magazine company, I nailed the wrestling style immediately. The boxing, Rich Countess was my editor at that point. I did an article on Mike Tyson. It turned into a great article after he said, "Bob, it's too much like an AP news story." Right? It's just dry. I know you know. He says write it more in the wrestling style in terms of, making points a little more lurid. Get them out there. Why was this more exciting than this? I don't need a blow by blow. I just need what the experience was about. And the light bulb went off in my head, and I just changed it, and it turned into a great article. So helps to be surrounded by some professionals too, So, but I do think reading all those magazines was a nice primer for actually working in them.
I'm going to give you guys one of my earliest memories of magazines, and this has nothing to do with sports, which kind of blows my mind. But one time, this is somewhere in upstate New York, and I think it was 1971, so I would have been about 7 years old. We went to like an old-fashioned mom and pop gas station that was kind of like that era's equivalent of a 7-Eleven, just a generic mom and dad owned gas station. But they had magazines inside, and I saw this one that just like caught my eye, and I was like hooked in, lured in immediately, and you're going to be blown away. It was the Saturday Evening Post, and what
classic.
did it? Yeah, and what it did for me was one of those huge old-fashioned Norman Rockwell covers that they were so famous for. And I think it may have been the one, and this is a very timely for this time of year we're in right now. It may have been the one with the elderly grandpa holding out the Thanksgiving turkey, and the whole family is gathered around the table. I mean, coming from a big Italian family, I mean, maybe that appealed to me in some weird way. And over the next few months after that first time getting that weird issue of Saturday Night's Evening's Post, I would go out and buy other issues of this. I think the next one had Santa Claus on the cover. Again, I'm 7 years old. This is big for me. but those pictures of those pictures from Norman Rockwell really hit home with me. And I mean, my folks could understand that I was really into this. They even went and got me like a coffee table book of Norman Rockwell's greatest photos and stuff. They probably thought young Steve's going to become an artist someday. They didn't know I'd become a wrestling nut or whatever. But those were fun times. And I read up about the magazine. Apparently it is technically still in print, but the real the large size magazine, like anything else, is kind of like, I mean, you couldn't find a new issue if you really wanted to, but they have a website, and but I do have some fond memories of that magazine.
There you go. And can I bring up something quickly? We all read comic books, right? Do you remember the full page ad, Sell Grit?
Yes, Grit.
Sell Grit, and they would show a kid with a bag. He would be selling grit. And I was wondering, how the heck do you introduce people to buy something called grit? And I just thought it was a come on even then, and I never thought much about it. It's about 8 years ago. I'm in a Barnes and Noble, and what do I find but grit?
Really?
They were still publishing the damn thing. It was just this general interest.
Yeah.
Everything from recipes to a story about, Pete Alonso hitting home runs or something like that. Everything in between. It was just a general, and it survived. So I don't know if it's out now, but I'd have to go to a Barnes and Noble or something to find it. Because, all the magazines today are niche. The ones that are surviving are niche. They're either the supermarket end cap magazines that are like, Rolling Stone presents the history of Bruce Springsteen or something like that. $15 magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And people like those because they're keepsakes more than
They call them
publications.
I'm getting that for Erica for Christmas, by the way, that particular issue.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Wow.
In the industry, they call those bookazines. That's the word for those. Yeah.
Bookazines.
Yeah. Because they're like one shot book style. It's almost like a short trade paperback, and they charge you like $15 for it or something like that. I'm so tempted to buy those, but they're so expensive. It's almost like buying a book, and I have to think, am I really, like, how much am I really going to read this? Like, I see if there's one on Star Trek, I'm always tempted. I saw one recently on Superman with Christopher Reeve on the cover. There was a Rocky one, but I'm just like, I don't know if I want it that badly. But I wanted to mention two at once. And the reason is because one of them, like Saturday Evening Post, is still in print, but it's sort of like a relic of a bygone age. And one of them is not in print, which is more kind of relevant. But one is Reader's Digest. And this one, I never bought a copy of Reader's Digest off a newsstand ever. But it was kind of my first exposure to magazines because my grandmother used to read it. I think everybody's grandmother read Reader's Digest. And so she would always have the little digest-sized magazine laying around in the living room or whatever. And I picked it up. And I just remember being so fascinated because there was just like a little bit of everything in there. I don't know, like you could find jokes. There was a joke section. There would be interesting articles. There'd be recipes. There'd be cartoons. It was just all over the place. It didn't feel like it was specifically for men or specifically for women, even though it was probably read more by women. There would be serialized fiction. I mean, a little bit of everything. And I just thought, wow, this is such a great idea. I didn't even really know what a magazine was, but it's still around. But if there's another, in fact, my daughter, which I thought was so endearing, my daughter for a little bit was subscribing to it because I guess she had heard about it from me and she was reading it for a while. But one that is gone. Here's one that's gone that I wanted to mention. And this was probably my first real magazine obsession, even before I got into wrestling magazines, because more than being a sports fan, I was a baseball fan and things, but more than sports, I was a huge movie fan as a kid. I've always been obsessed with movies. And there was a magazine called Starlog, which I know you guys must know of because there's a wrestling connection there. All those George Napolitano magazines were hooked up with Starlog. Fangoria was probably their biggest seller, and it still exists, but Starlog doesn't. And Starlog was the mother magazine. Starlog was the place you could go, for people that don't know, to read about all the science fiction, fantasy movies that were coming out. Basically, all the stuff that's taken over the movie industry now. You could find out everything about them, when they were coming out, what they were, who was making them. Plus, you could read stuff about older things. Like there would always be a lot of stuff about Star Wars and Star Trek and Doctor Who and all that kind of stuff. And again, in a pre-internet time, this was like the Bible. I mean, the page I would go to immediately would be, they had a whole section. This sounds so quaint. A whole section of what's coming out and when.
Right.
What month and what date, because we had no friggin' idea. And like you'd be excited, like, oh my God, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? When is that coming out? When is the next Indiana Jones movie coming out? there was no way to know unless you read it in a magazine like Starlog. So that was my Bible. I think the first issue I bought was right around the time maybe Star Trek 3 or 4 came out.
Right.
And I started reading it then, and I read it again right up to the mid 90s. And again, I hate to say, the internet. Once all the movie websites started popping up on the web and they had all that nuts and bolts info, stopped reading Starlog, and Starlog went away because a lot of people did exactly what I did.
I was actually there for the first issue that came out. I was in my drugstore, and like Brian and like you, Bob, I was a huge Star Trek fan, and before Starlog, there had been these very, very cool and very well made Star Trek poster books that had like big. You'd open it up, and in the inside there was the Enterprise covered by the Tholian web, but and they had some nice little articles in there too. But when Starlog came out, and it's got Kirk and Spock on the very first issue, I think they had the episode guide to Star Trek in the book too. I mean, it just was so accessible, and I remember, at the time we didn't know it was going to become like a monthly magazine. I think maybe the first few issues were released maybe bi-monthly or quarterly, but it eventually, like Brian said, it became very, very popular. It became a monthly magazine, and one of the magazines I have on my list was a magazine that really got probably a success from Starlog, which was a magazine called Cinefantastique.
Oh, I loved it.
Which was like, it was taking like the Starlog format, but like making it more like critical. Like, let's look at the movies more critically. Let's review them. Let's point out the negatives. Let's point out the good and the bad. Starlog began like that, and it was great like that in those early issues. But after a while, it just seemed like it was all the publicists were writing Starlog, and every movie's great. Yeah, the never-ending story is great. Star Trek's great. Yeah, Mad Max is great. They're all great. And after a while, it just seemed like the magazine was so watered down. It was like, why even buy it anymore? That's how I felt.
Yeah,
Cinefantastique was so great. And they kind of invented that term, which came to basically represent horror, sci-fi, fantasy, like all the movie genres that aren't based in pure reality, essentially. Right. And actually, they stopped about 20 years ago, and they started printing on not printing, but they started publishing online.
Right.
And I remember the guy, his name escapes me, but the guy who basically inherited it, and he was keeping it alive online, he started trying desperately to buy up as many of the sci-fi movie website domains as he could,
really,
just to reduce the competition. He was basically trying to stop the tide from coming in. That's it. It was impossible.
Yeah,
I remember that because I actually had a horror movie website at the time, which was getting a lot of traction, and he tried to buy me out, and I wouldn't do it. And that's how you know you're doing well. But eventually, even the online stopped, and it was just there was no market for it. But that part is sad because, like you said, a lot of it was movie criticism. It wasn't just hype. And now we see in the movie journalism field, such as it is, I mean, there's hardly any real intelligent film criticism going on in published form, and that's kind of like where we're at right now.
Well, I want to take you guys back into wrestling just for a brief minute. I mean, we all have our favorite wrestling magazines. If I had to pick just one, if I had to narrow it down to just one, I'm going to go with the original Ring Wrestling, published by Nat Lobay. That's probably the one that I kind of grew up on the earliest, or got the earliest issues of. And I mean, even as like a 12 or 13-year-old, I could tell that this was way different than the Aftermags. No offense, Bob. But
it was, yeah.
But I loved them. I loved all the authentic results in the back. As you always say, Bob. Right?
You don't have to apologize to me. My favorite magazines growing up were, which a little bit later, I guess, the Kaiser books with all the same agate pages in the back with all the results. That's why I bought them. They had no imagination to them whatsoever. They'd have a picture of Jim Brunzell, and the headline would be Jim Brunzell on the cover. but I liked them because of the meat and potatoes coverage of stuff that I couldn't see, other territories. So no, you're not insulting me at all. Those were my favorites.
But Nat Lobay, he had that. whatever he had, he made it seem like it was believable. He made it seem
Yes.
like wrestling was something to be taken seriously. This is a
Yes.
sport, that's what you grab from it, right, Brian?
It was, yeah. And I've told Tom Burke this. I think it was the best. It's before my time, but I think it was the best wrestling magazine of all time. And they treated it like you said. It was called The Ring Wrestling, and it was like reading The Ring boxing, except it just happened to be about wrestling. In fact, you could. I've been amazed because I have some back issues. They would even. I mean, I'm sure everybody that wrote for that magazine was pretty smart to the business, but they would even get into works versus shoots. Mm-hmm. And you're talking about in the 50s and 60s. And they're writing like, I really hope this is going to be a shooting match and not a hippodrome match, as they used to call it. And meanwhile, you're thinking in your head, well, I mean, there are no more shooting matches. But it's kind of interesting that they were even writing on that level. Like they would acknowledge, wink, wink, that it was a show, but they wouldn't go too deep into that. They would talk about it like it's a sport and there's a lot of exhibitions, but maybe not all of them. And we're going to leave it purposely vague. It was just a really interesting approach that no one else took back then.
Speaking of that magazine, you guys I hope you vouch for me on this. You would open it and you'd see the table of contents with the listing of the editors, and you'd go down that thing and there'd be a blurb. The Ring magazine is a magazine that any man may bring home to his family without fear.
Yes. I've seen that.
It is clean and it is wholesome. I'm not quoting verbatim, but it was an entire paragraph saying nothing dirty here. You don't have to worry about it.
There's no blow up doll ads in the back or anything.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's true though. That was the distinction. Yeah.
But I'm glad you guys remember that. I wish I do have a copy of it somewhere here, but I love that blurb. It sounded like Jack Webb was reading it. The straight-laced. It is wholesome and it is clean. It's just I love that. It was great. Can I go on about a couple more of the horror genre magazines or the companies? I got to give a tip of the cap to the long lamented Warren Publishing.
Oh yeah, yes.
Famous Monsters of Filmland, Creepy, Eerie.
Uh-huh.
And of course, the magazine that if I ever brought it home, my mother would slap me, Vampirilla, because she was the sexiest thing on two legs back in the 70s, man. I am telling you. And the reason, because the covers, they had some of the best comic pros doing the Vampirilla covers, and the other covers are like Carmen Infantino, Alex Toth, Neil Adams, Frank Frazetta, right? Wally Wood, so many great covers. And I remember being a kid staring at that thing going, man, I wish I could buy this. So I don't think I would buy Famous Monsters of Filmland and Creepy and Eerie. I don't think I ever bought Vampirilla. I was too scared that my mother would slap me.
I had two. Can I jump in or I don't want to?
Yeah, sure.
I had two that were like that for me, where they were so edgy that I felt like I should not be reading this. One of them I bought myself, but one of them my dad used to read. And this is not going where you think it's going, but my dad. So my dad, here's one. Tell me if you guys were fond of this one. National Lampoon magazine.
Yes, of course.
That was that was my number one most missed title.
National Lampoon, my dad used to read it. And so I used to pick it up and read it. So I'm going to try to describe this for people that are not familiar or are younger. I'm not saying, it wasn't like a nudie magazine or a porn magazine or anything, but when you're 13, it's about the closest thing you could imagine, in the sense of like it's forbidden. There was some nudity in there. There was very adult humor. You definitely felt like you were reading something that was not meant for you, which is very exciting when you're a kid. And I remember some of the cartoons were so funny, and even like the one panel ones. If I found ones, as long as they weren't dirty, I would sometimes cut them out and post them. I had like a bulletin board in my room, and I would post them. Never mind the fact that my dad didn't realize that I was reading his National Lampoons, and the fact that I would cut a cartoon out, he would notice immediately. But I would say, this is just too funny. I've got to hang it up. And some of them were really, really dark. Like I distinctly remember one, and my family thought I was out of my like, are you okay, Brian? It was a cartoon where it's a husband and wife, like an older, very kind of sedate husband and wife sitting at a table having breakfast. And the wife says something like, I spoke to Doris the other day, and she makes the most beautiful napkin holders out of used bottles of detergent. And the husband just quietly just lifts up a gun and just shoots her in the head and then puts it down and just goes back to eating breakfast. And I just thought that is the sickest, funniest thing I've ever seen. And but like stuff like that. And I'm 13, 14, and it's shaping my sense of humor and my mind. But there's that one. And there was another one that was affiliated with it because I think they had the same publisher family. But I would buy this on my own, and it's related to comics. They're still around in a much reduced form. Heavy Metal. Heavy Metal magazine was brilliant. I was obsessed with it. And they focused mainly on international comics, European, other places. Like a lot of stuff would be translated from Spanish, Italian, German, what have you. There'd be some American. They'd have some American comic book artists in there. Like you'd see people like, well, I don't know if they're all American, but like Richard Corbin, Simon Beasley, people that would do traditional comic books and things. But then there'd be, and again, it was very R-rated, very adult. There was a lot of sex, a lot of violence.
Yeah.
Yes.
Can we go back to the Lampoon for a second?
Yeah, sure.
The list of people who wrote for the Lampoon. I mean,
oh yes,
from the editor Matty Simmons, Doug Kenny, P.J. O'Rourke, who wrote the original Vacation article. And if you've ever read that, it's one of the funniest things you will ever read in your life. They based some movies on it. Bruce McCall, Tony Hendra, the list went on. I collected a bunch of them, and I considered the TV Guide parody issue from around 77 to be the funniest thing I've ever read. It was a little TV guide in the middle of the Lampoon, but it was all fake shows like Rutabaga! Variety show for brain damaged invalids. I mean, it was just, it was, I got thrown out of a college library, me and two friends of mine. We were sitting there all looking at it together. One of us was quietly reading it, and we were all falling over each other, and we got thrown out of the library. It was absolutely hysterical. And I cannot believe there is no National Lampoon. And I didn't even mention the letters to the editor. My God.
Oh, yeah.
Love the editor. Dear editor, oh my God. It's got his eyes. Signed, Christy Brinkley giving birth. So I am telling you, the snark, just the wit. Oh, no, not wit. It's just the anything goes spirit of the National Lampoon. I absolutely adored that magazine. I really did. Bought it constantly.
I wanted to add my memory of it too. I mean, just like you guys. I mean, I had gotten the issues and back issues, but there was one. I guess this is my love of sports. This particular issue stood out to me. They had an issue of Lampoon that parodied Sports Illustrated. In fact, on the inside, they had a cover that was completely like an SI cover. You would have thought it was legitimate, but the headline was "The Call is Courage." And it was about the first MLB umpire who was blind, and he was calling balls and strikes. But it was so cool, it just had you on the floor laughing. This magazine.
That's great.
At every issue they had, I think it was either Canadian Corner or some kind of a sportsman thing. The author was Red Ruffensore. Just that kind of nonsense would just make me sit there and giggle for 20 minutes. I just loved it.
The National Lampoon grew out of the Harvard Lampoon, right? Or are they unrelated? Okay, because there was also a book. It's not a magazine, but it was like this sort of underground book that made the rounds in the 70s and 80s. It was one of those like college kids and all that, back when they had attention spans and read books. And it sort of filtered its way down even to younger kids, like teenagers. So it was when Lord of the Rings was really popular, when it had that big burst of popularity in the 70s, especially when kind of like the counterculture latched onto it and Led Zeppelin and everything. And they put out a book, Harvard Lampoon. It was called Board of the Rings. And it was this very like R-rated parody of Lord of the Rings. I don't even know if it's still in print, but it was hilarious. In fact, the opening blurb, you know how when you'd open the first page of a book and they would have like a passage from inside the book.
Yeah, right.
So they had a passage on the first page which read like something out of a tawdry romance novel, except it was like an elf and a hobbit, and but the best part about it was the passage was nowhere in the book. It was just on that front page insert. And again, it was just brilliant. I don't even know if it's still in print, that book.
Wow. Steve, any memories of that too?
Now, I'm not familiar with that, but I know what Brian's talking about. There were lots of those books that floated around college campuses that were underground materials that were really popular. And I did a little research, and I saw that the Lampoon, it began in 1970, it ended in 98. Somehow, I think must be wrong, because I think it ended a whole lot earlier than that. Because I remember in the 90s, there was a magazine called Spy that tried to be like what Lampoon used to be.
Yes.
But it was good for what it was, but it wasn't like, nothing could match Lampoon. But
I think they revived it briefly.
Yeah.
And it wasn't nearly as good. It had nobody involved with it, I think, with the original crew. And it just, it failed almost instantly. I remember there was a revival.
Were they the ones that had the cover where it was buy this magazine or we'll kill this dog or something?
Yeah,
Do you remember we'll shoot this dog?
I think that was Spy.
Yeah.
And they had a puppy with a gun to its head on the cover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
it was okay. We got that for a while. I remember that one, but
keep it with the humor. I'll just list here. Anybody remember Cracked magazine?
Oh,
it was kind of like a mini Mad. It was like trying to be like Mad magazine, but not really.
I got into that before Mad Magazine. I was into Cracked. I didn't even know it was a knockoff.
Ran from 1958 to 2007 and still exists as a website that isn't even remotely anything like Cracked magazine.
Cracked, you're talking about.
Cracked, yeah. And I liked it because it was funny. I thought it was just humorous back in the day. So
Sylvester P. Smythe.
And I'll mention Mad Magazine because it keeps coming and going these days. Like it stops and then it gets printed again. I think it's still being printed now. I saw one within the last 6 months on a newsstand. So I don't know what to make of that. I don't know if they're specials, but they'll never replace the original Mad. I think that's something you could bring home. Alfred Edelman on every cover. You could bring that magazine home. Your parents wouldn't yell at you for it, I don't think.
Fold the back cover to get like the picture. Right.
Spy versus Spy.
I had a whole book of Spy versus Spy comics, like a collection of them.
Let's go back to horror just for a minute. I wonder if either of you guys have even heard of Rod Serling's Twilight Zone magazine.
I remember that. Yes.
They published fiction, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
My wife subscribed to it. And I'm looking at one issue she just handed me, which is going to be part of my advertising for, here's some old covers. In this one magazine are stories by Stephen King, Joyce Carol Oates, Harlan Ellison, Robert Sheckley, Dan Simmons, and more people. I'm like, holy smokes.
Yeah.
Joyce Carol Oates?
Yeah, that name probably helped them get people on board. There's a prestige to that name. When I was a kid and I used to write fictional short stories as a kid. I loved writing little horror stories and little sci-fi stories. And I used to fantasize about publishing one possibly in Twilight Zone magazine because I used to see it on the newsstand and go, oh, wow, that would be a great place. There was another one. It's still around, but there was a magazine called Fantasy and Science Fiction, which was like a little digest of fantasy and science fiction stories. And, those were like my goals when I was a kid, write a sci-fi story and get it published in one of those magazines.
Well, anyways, Twilight Zone was around from 81 through 89, and it was not a handsome magazine. It was on pulp paper, cheap pulp paper too, and the layouts were kind of like thrown there, but the writing was superb, including by Rod Serling, who wrote in every issue that I have here. So all I know is it's one of the best magazines. I guess not enough people saw. It was just like it looked. What it looked like? It looked like one of the Kaiser books. It would just say on the cover, in this issue, this author, this author, this author, this author, that type of thing, and one image, and it wasn't very colorful. But once you sat down and started to absorb the articles, you'd go, oh my gosh, these are great. So tip of hat to that one. Ends my horror here. Steve, give us a magazine, man. How about it?
Well, I'm going to give you two. One in a magazine form, one in a newspaper form. I'm sure the name Street and Smith brings back a memory for you guys.
Yeah.
every spring, spring training, you have the Street and Smith baseball annual would come out and give you all the inside facts about your favorite teams, all the stats from the prior seasons. And in newspaper form, I mean, I know in our household, we had to have the sporting news like every week. I mean, particularly in those cold New York winters,
Oh yeah.
it's like I remember like my brother and I driving out in like on a Saturday night. It's like 30 degrees out. We're going to go get a pizza, but we're worried about starting the car back. When we get the pizza, will the car start, with the auto freeze? But we'd always run into the drugstore. We'd always go to the drugstore, get one issue of the sporting news, because they'd have the AL beat and the NL beat with, Bill Conlon, and they would tell you about the trades, Peter Gammons. They would tell you about the trades and the rumors of trades and the offseason. And I mean, as you guys are in the Northeast right now, it's like, how else do you get through the winter without having like dreams of baseball dancing in your head,
Well, I will say that, it was passed around my house this morning. It was absolutely irreplaceable. But you got to remember, too, the thing we liked the best was, again, more agate, where they had the statistics section. And with the advent of the internet, here comes Baseball Reference and other sites like that. And it was And the yearly Who's Who in Baseball, which came out, I bought every issue from 1971 into the last one that they published. But there's no need for it anymore because they had a limited amount of stats, and now you can get all this information by logging in. The charm of all this is just, I really miss all the charm of those old school magazines. I really do.
I used to like Baseball Digest. I would read that one a lot. That was a good one.
Dig this. It's still out there.
Is it?
But it's a full-size magazine. Why is Baseball Digest? Why is Baseball Digest a full-size magazine?
Speaking of digest and speaking of like comforting old titles that are going away, I just heard the other day that the Farmer's Almanac is going to cease publication.
I heard it too.
After 250 years
or
something.
How could this be?
It's true. And I was in a store the other day that had it's like $8. I said, well, I'm going to grab this. But I didn't. I don't know why I didn't pick it up, but because I knew it was the last one. Did you get one?
When I was a kid, I bought one. And again, it was just this interesting, charming, like I'm not a farmer. I'm reading, what the barometric pressure is going to be on July 12th. But there were other things. There were articles, again, just about all kinds of interesting things. I don't know. It seemed like an interesting relic. You know what the problem is, Bob? Like just how you were saying, I saw it, but I didn't buy it. I think we're all to blame for this problem.
Yes, we are.
I think everybody no one supports these things and they complain when they're gone. It's like we like the idea of these things existing, just the comforting knowledge that somewhere out there, the Farmer's Almanac is still being published, but we're not going to actually buy it. You know what I mean?
And the other problem is no one wants to pay for their information anymore.
Right.
Nobody wants to pay for it.
People get furious online whenever there's a paywall for anything. And I'm going, guys, this is a job that people are doing. They would like to make money for this job. Mm-hmm. Not everything is going to be free at your fingertips. Like this, the expectation of that is insane.
But I met a guy who he's a good buddy of mine that lives in Scranton, PA, and he remembers going to the matches when Bruno would come to Scranton in the 60s. He's an older than I am. And he would tell me about in Scranton, like in Binghamton, when I was growing up, we had two newspapers. We had a morning and then we had an evening edition. Well, he was telling me that in Scranton, there was so much need for news and so much interest in newspapers. They had what they called a blue edition that would come out at midnight. And that midnight edition, that was for the people that wanted to buy a newspaper at midnight. They would buy it, and then the next day's edition would come out at 6 a.m., 7 a.m. or whatever. But I mean, this is why our society is the way it is now. It's like the whoever made these decisions, they're assuming, they're going to read the newspaper on the internet. They're going to get all their news on the internet. People are just going on the internet looking at porn. They're looking at this is why our entire country is de-evolving here.
Well, this is not magazine related, but it's a jump off from what you're saying about the transition from print media though to the internet.
Right.
Is I used to always, I try to really kind of limit especially when I'm home, I'm not just looking at my phone and stuff, I'm doing a million other things.
Right.
And I used to try to give people the benefit of the doubt when I would see people that were just intently looking at their phone somewhere. And I would go, don't judge this person because you don't know. They could be getting emergency news. They could be buying something that they desperately need. They could be, doing something, making an appointment, something really important. And I will tell you what, not that I'm a nosy Nancy or anything, but 9 plus times out of 10 that I have happened to maybe walk by or glance and catch what they're actually doing, it's just useless. It's just they're playing a game. They're looking at dumb pictures. They're scrolling through TikTok. That's fine. We all have these mindless activities we enjoy, but the problem is that is all they're doing.
That's right.
And that's really scary. But that's the kind of thing that has killed off magazines and so many other things. So yeah.
I'll do a brief 2-minute editorial here. This morning I went in and had breakfast, right? I went out and I'm sitting there and I have my phone in front of me and I'm looking at my phone, but I'm looking at today's New York Daily News as it is published in a digital format.
Sure.
In other words, the actual paper, the headlines, the cover, the front, the back, the sports section, the agate, most newspapers publish a digital version of what they do. I proudly support that industry. I get the New York Times as well. I want to pay for my for my news. I want to do it. I feel like I owe the industry something.
Yes.
And it's still, the agate's still great, guys. The agate pages, Steve, in the back with last night's box scores. That stuff's irreplaceable. And it's right there. I'd rather look at the box scores that way than log on to the Basketball Reference or something and do it.
Right.
Because you can also get the article about the game at the same time. So
that's
to me,
the other
it's just a
thing.
no-brainer.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because that's another thing I would say to myself. They might be reading something. They might be reading a book that way. Just because you don't like to read a book that way, maybe they are. Maybe they're reading a magazine or a newspaper. Unfortunately, there's very few Bob Smiths out there because they never seem to be doing that. They're just doing the most mindless, inane things constantly, and that makes me very sad.
If you don't think I'm old by looking at me, look at my phone. Because I swear to God, if I'm sitting, if I'm having a lunch or a coffee or something, I am reading the newspaper. So, what can I tell you? I just feel like I owe it, and I think I'm getting better educated doing it that way too. So, what can I say? You want to continue on with some more sports stuff? Let's do this. Remember Sport magazine?
Yes.
Not Sports Illustrated. These ones that competed with Sports Illustrated. Sport. This was a pretty good magazine. It ran from 1946 all the way to 2000. In its prime, the editor was Dick Schaap, I should say. One of my favorite sports writers of all time, wrote my favorite baseball book of all time. And it offered writings from Grantley Rice, John Lardner, Dan Daniel, Roger Kahn. It was a really, really good magazine. It's kind of slickish paper magazine. One of my favorite articles was back in 1970. Yes, I'm old. Okay. And it was penned by Ron Swoboda of the Mets. Mm-hmm. And it was a pretty bitter story about how he wasn't getting along with Seaver. And he was mad that they were jettisoning out all the older players and bringing new guys in. And I think it may have led to his trade to the Expos right after that article came out at the end of the season. But it was Sport Magazine. I just remember that as being a kid. Man, he talked about Seaver taking money out of his wallet to pay a pizza guy or something. And it was just all this insider. It was like wrestling magazine style stuff, But it was better than that. I thought it had a good editorial content. I didn't really care about pictures at that point. I was more interested in the writing, but it was a good-looking magazine. And Sport was very popular. Do you guys remember it?
I do remember it. And I remember Inside Sports, which was kind of another one that tried to be the next Sports Illustrated, and they even had their own swimsuit issue. And I think it's just another thing in this with our world today. Here in Tampa, like we have Publix grocery store. That's our main grocery store. And I can tell Brian that they do keep PWI. there is one of the regular magazines that they do sell. But like SI, you could never get an issue of SI or Sports Illustrated unless it's the Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, which they have in bulk. I mean, you probably have like 20 or 30 copies you can buy throughout the year. But I mean, like, could you fellows ever have envisioned a day would come where you can buy the swimsuit issue, but you can't buy the regular weekly issue? I mean, it's like,
Well,
It's pretty
unfortunately, yeah,
insane.
you can envision it. Yeah, that's the problem.
It's
I
pretty
remember
insane because, yeah.
Inside Sports ran from 79 to 98, by the way. I just want to bring
Cool.
that up.
Yeah, because the swimsuit issue back in the day was looked at almost as an abomination. Like, why are they doing this? This is so pandering and ridiculous. We don't need a swimsuit issue. And now it's the only one anyone talks about or buys.
And Sports Illustrated, I hate to say this, with its history of amazing photography and great writing, it's just not Sports Illustrated anymore in my eyes. It's gone through so many different hands. You know, it doesn't have the flavor anymore. It's
no.
So I'm glad they're still around, but not interested in it. Now I want to bring you into Pulpland with sports.
Yes.
I found in my collection here from 1981 issue of something called Sport World, which was the closest thing to a wrestling magazine I ever saw that covered sports. Pulp
Really?
paper, right? I can't find a lot of information. It was published by Reese Publishing out of New York City. And like I said, like everything was negative in the book. Here's some headlines for the one I just picked up. Why they're out to get Steve Garvey. What? We're talking baseball here. And is one clubhouse big enough for Dave Winfield and Reggie Jackson?
Are you sure Stanley Weston didn't
I am
publish this
telling you
magazine?
the whole thing. But here's the funny part. I'm going through this magazine as I'm looking at it. It's all this, it's yellow paper and pulp. But there's an article by Maury Allen in there, and he was a famous newspaper writer.
Right.
So it was the kind of mix of pure pulp, and it was laid out just like wrestling magazine, just like the London magazine. Big block headlines with, lurid subheads, and but it was baseball, So it's a strange magazine. I don't know how long it lasted. I just know that it was out there. And I have a couple issues here. And I must have liked it because I bought two of them.
There was that family of magazines. I know we know Lou Sahadi with Wrestling World, and those magazines are very well put together. But they had their sister magazines, which were like Hockey Illustrated, Football Illustrated. I think I'm assuming they had a Baseball Illustrated. But those were really well put together magazines, and they weren't like the ones you're talking about, Bob, where they're trying to be exploitive or whatever. I mean, they just told you what, how good the teams were. Let's, analyze them as the season begins. And they were good, well-written sports books.
Do you have any more sports magazines, Brian, that you remember that may not be around anymore?
I don't think this was a magazine. It was, I'm talking about the National. It was
the National, yes.
It was more of a newspaper, right? If I'm remembering it right. But it was all sports. So it was like
good.
They had the brilliant idea. Anything these guys want to read about in the newspaper is the sports section. So what if the whole magazine, the whole newspaper was just the sports section? Because this is what I remember. Now picture this. You guys will appreciate this because you're older than I am. But the thought of this happening today, it's literally impossible. When I was in high school, all the kids read the Daily News. I mean, like they would be guys that would come in with the Daily News and they'd be reading them like in the cafeteria. Could you imagine a high school student reading the Daily News in the cafeteria? But what they would do, all these meatheads, it was like you would watch them, and the Daily News has their sports section in the back still to this day.
Sure.
Every single one of them, without fail, they'd plop down the Daily News in front of them, and they'd immediately just flip it over, boom, and just start reading the sports section. So somebody had the brilliant idea, what if the newspaper was all sports? And that was the one, and it was huge. When I was in high school, it became a huge hit, like 90, 91, 92, and Meltzer had a column. Meltzer had a wrestling column in there because I remember that's why I got interested in it. And I couldn't believe you had a sports newspaper with a professional wrestling column, because all we used to get were those little box scores in the Daily News about who beat who at Madison Square Garden. So that was one that I got into for a while.
Well, Frank DeFord was the publisher of that, and he I think he even said that Dave Meltzer was the premier or a premier sports writer in America, which was really saying something.
That's what really helped to raise his profile. I felt like that was all happening at the same time that the scandals in the
Yes.
WWF were happening.
Yeah.
So that really took him to another level, because the Meltzer of the 80s, like you and John talk about a lot, was much more snarky and immature and a lot of name
Junk food
calling,
dog, all that nonsense.
very sophomoric. Like, it was more like a zine. And then he got more serious after that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Shoot, I was with PWI and I was bringing the National in. I had a stack of Nationals out near my dad. I really loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
From Lupica on down, it was good writing, and it was.
Oh, that's
all
right.
sports.
Yeah, Lupica.
Yeah.
Oh man, I worked with my publisher at WWE was Barry Werner, who was the sports editor of the Daily News for years before he came to us.
Mhm.
And he would talk about Lupica all the time, like he was talking about, a Greek god or something. Like he had such reverence for Lupica. In fact, whenever we would, if a writer was really good who wrote for us, or anytime he wanted to put somebody over, he would always go, "He's like Lupica." That was always like his standard. He would say that about Keith Greenberg all the time. He's like Lupica. That's why we keep him on, because he's like Lupica. So, I kind of cut my teeth working with him.
I wanted to mention a couple of, we talked about entertainment magazines earlier with Starlog and Cine Fantastique, but there were a couple of movie and TV magazine type books I wanted to talk about. I thought Premiere was pretty good for what it did. That was out from 87 to 2007, and that would give you, especially like as you're approaching the Christmas movie season or the summer blockbuster season, they'd hype all the movies and have great photo essays. I remember back in '94, like when Pulp Fiction came out, I think they had a great photo spread on that. And Brian would remember that when the Star Trek Generations came out, they had a big spread of Shatner and Malcolm McDowell, and that was really, really well done. And I think probably my favorite magazine to read, the one that I look forward to, almost like looking forward to the Observer every week, was Entertainment Weekly. Entertainment Weekly, back when you had those appointment TV viewing shows like Sopranos or Mad Men, or even back in the day when office cooler watching Seinfeld every Thursday night with your friends at work. That magazine, Entertainment Weekly, recapped all the shows. They had episode guides. They had really good writing, and I was subscribed to it. And one day, either I was getting old, I don't know, but all of a sudden, the print of the magazine really started to get small. I had to get cheaters to read the magazine with, and before you know it, it was out of print. But I missed that magazine because it was a huge selling magazine, but it just kind of like aged out like everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I used to get the summer movie preview in Premiere magazine. That was a big one for me every year to pick up.
It was a lot of fun.
Good one. I did not have that one on my list, Steve. Very good. That's a good one to bring up. Anybody remember Argosy?
Well, I remember Bruno was on the cover of it. Yeah,
that's the one issue I bought. That's right, 1974. And I'll tell you what, it was a print magazine. It was a good magazine. I thought it was literally, it was considered like a pulp magazine. I thought it was 2 notches better than a pulp magazine. It happened to be on pulp paper, but I thought the writing and the photography and everything. The magazine goes back to the 1800s when it was called the Argosy, right? And it was different phases. It was a pulp magazine, a children's story magazine, a news and entertainment magazine. But I think its best was from 1942 to 2004. And it marketed itself as a men's lifestyle and an adventure magazine. They had articles about windsurfing and stuff like that. But I remember the one with Bruno on the cover, the bloody Bruno picture on the cover. I thought it had more substance than most pulpy magazines, and that's all I know about it.
Yeah, it was. I've heard of it, and I have a book about the history of pulp fiction magazines, and I know Argosy went through that phase because I think I may be totally off base. I think the first Tarzan stories were published in there, or
that could be true, yeah,
or maybe Sherlock Holmes, something like that. They would be in there, and like you said, it became one of those men's. That's a genre that's gone now. Those men's adventure magazines.
Yeah.
They were just like these very manly, virile. Here's this magazine about men doing manly, bold things that men do.
We're going on safari. Yeah, a real
Yes,
safari.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
But you don't have anything like that anymore. That's just dead, completely dead.
Unless you count, what is it, Maxim?
No, but that's different. Those are those lad. That's humor, and it's just like flat out sexist garbage. Like the men's magazines weren't really. They were, yeah. I'm sure there was sexism in there, but it was more just like macho, old school kind of,
The one I had was pretty straight laced. I didn't think there was anything. I brought it home. I'll put it that way. I put it on my bookshelf.
Oh yeah, no, I don't think anything objectionable, but just aimed at men.
And I remember there's a big menthol cigarette ad on the back. I can't remember the kind of cigarettes it was. What was it? Lucky's or not? I don't forget what it was. But anyway, it's a big menthol thing on the back.
Well, Cool Menthol was Gorilla Monsoon's.
Oh, that's
brand,
it. Cool. That's what it was. Cool.
Okay. There you go.
There you go. That's what was Gorilla Monsoon's cigarette of choice, right?
Yes.
But anyway, you want to do some rock and roll? Let's do some rock and roll.
Yes.
Because I became around the age of 14 a major rocker, and I bought a lot of music magazines. And in my town, I don't know why, in upstate New York, but I used to pick up a magazine. I'll bet you guys never heard of it, called Beatle. Beetle. What Cream magazine was to the U.S., Beatle was for Canada. And for a while, they started distributing it in the United States. So you'd find articles on the Guess Who, Rush, and Anne Murray next to articles about Springsteen, Southside Johnny, and Boston.
Wow.
So it was really a unique magazine because it was looking at it from two different countries' perspectives at the same time. And it was good. That's what the writing was really good. Does anybody remember Zoo World? It's before your time. A competitor to Rolling Stone. It was a magazine, newspaper style, folded over, a lot of reviews, some pretty good writing. I liked it. But they printed the most tasteless headline I have ever seen. Are you ready for this one? Brace yourselves. This you can't get more tasteless than this. And they printed it with a straight face. Mama Cass dead at 2:38.
Oh,
that's
horrible.
Awful, isn't it?
Horrible.
It is. It isn't funny. It's not clever. It's just terrible.
No.
It ran from 72 to 75, and I bought most of them because the thing was 75% record reviews. I love record reviews. Now in the higher end of the spectrum, Crawdaddy. Any remembrance? Am I too old? You've heard? Yeah, geez, I am old.
I'm more from the spin generation.
There you go. But anyway, Crawdaddy was founded in '68, and great music journalists such as John Landau and Richard Meltzer wrote for it. It was a magazine credited for giving Bruce Springsteen his first national publicity. Wow. Held in high esteem. It's the first national rock magazine, and it lasted until '79. But the granddaddy of them all, the one that all the kids I knew were running to get when I was a teenager, was called Circus Magazine.
I remember that.
Circus had big, beautiful color photos that you could cut out and put on your walls of your bedroom. So if you had a favorite band, you'd wait for your favorite band to be in Circus, and they all invariably had at least 2 pages that were just a photo. And the print was all like, the full color magazine, slick paper, and they made great posters. And everybody loved Circus for that. I thought it was written, but they had Kurt Loder, David Frick, Paul Nelson, and famous names from the genre writing for Circus. So, you ever hear of Musician Magazine?
Yes,
that's one.
Yeah, is that the one? Yeah,
that was for players.
Right. Is that the one where they would publish like a lot of transcriptions for guitar and things like that, like actual sheet music included in it? Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. And then it would be reviews of amplifiers and, new guitar models and stuff. But you know what I like best out of all of them? Because I was a stodge even when I was 12. Stereo Review.
Yeah. It's a real barn burner.
Well, no, but here's the thing. It was full of, turntable reviews, but it also had a tremendous review section written by a guy named Steve Simmels, who to this day is my favorite rock critic of all time. No question. I thought he was brilliant. He wrote differently than everybody else did, and I thought it was an entertainment mag. And I subscribed to that for probably 10 years. In fact, that's the first magazine I ever subscribed to, was Stereo Review by myself as a young adult type of thing. So
I wonder if
there's
that was
a
like,
lot of rock and roll, and it's all old rock for these magazines, you guys.
was that a sister publication of what later became Video Review? Video Review was a big deal for a while in the 80s.
You know what? It exists to this day. I think it's Audio Video Review or something like that.
Okay.
One that I remember, I didn't really read it, but a lot of my friends did. I had a lot of friends in high school that were big metal guys. I was sort of like, I kind of liked it, but I didn't like have the whole gimmick. Like I just looked like me. You know what I mean? I never really changed my look, but it was Hit Parader.
Hit Parader, yes.
Yep.
So, which was funny. If you know anything about the history of Hit Parader, it started out as like covering big bands, and back in the 40s, it was just because it was based on the Hit Parade, which was like the predecessor of Billboard, sort of like all the biggest pop hits. But they rebranded, I'm assuming in the 60s or 70s, as a heavy metal magazine. And all the guys I hung out with read Hit Parader, and it had the posters and it had the sheet music. They were always looking for, the sheet music of all these really complex, like, because say what you will, I mean, a lot of those metal records had really complex guitar on them and bass and stuff. And so these guys that wanted to learn how to play it, they would publish a lot of the sheet music transcriptions in Hit Parader too.
I wonder if it's still published.
I think it might be.
I think it might be. And is it published in the UK?
I have no idea. Let me look. I'm curious now.
Maybe now I'm going to be at Barnes & Noble tomorrow looking over the magazines and go, which
So I almost feel like this happens with every one of these. The first thing that comes up when I Googled it, it was Hit Parader is back. These magazines are always coming back. So it says here it was published originally from 1942, which makes sense, like I said, to 2008. And it has just been relaunched this year, apparently.
Wow.
So
there you go. Steve, any ones on your list that we have not talked about?
I mean, I think we need to address the fact that, I mean, the gorilla in the room is Rolling Stone, which was one of the greatest magazines of all time. And it went from being this, humongous thing that would come out every month to being this thing that looks like it's a magazine, but it looks like a pamphlet. It's so skinny.
Yeah.
So I mean the stuff inside is still good, but I mean it's so emaciated. And I go to the website and I check that out, but I the last time I subscribed to it, it was just so pencil thin. It was just very sad to see.
Well,
that's
I think they're doing better as a pay website, to be honest with you. That's a lot of the magazines have morphed into pay websites with a paywall.
Right.
And their content is still pretty good. They still have some good writing in that.
I was going to address that because I find like they do a lot of pandering now. And, I don't want to sound like I'm some like kooky right-wing nut or anything. I'm the furthest thing from it. But, it seems to be like they've identified an audience they want to write towards so that they could sell their stuff.
Right.
And they pander to that audience, doing a lot of political type stuff that they never really would have waded that far into in the past, if that makes sense.
That's a good point. Good point. Yeah, another magazine that I used to get for like my mom and I enjoy it too was Vanity Fair. Vanity Fair had lots of good articles, political articles on celebrities and movie stars and things. And that's another one that's it's still around, but it's like the size of a pamphlet. It's just emaciated magazine where it used to be this
print
glorious magazine.
It's insane now. As someone who's been involved in publishing since '81, and in my last job with stuff that needed to be printed, stuff has gone up every single year since I've been involved with printing. It's insane. It's crazy how expensive
it is. If you think that's insane, I was just at the deli today.
And? Oh, just that. Yeah, okay.
Right. Say no more. Say no more.
Hey, let me bring up a magazine I know you guys have heard of. Omni.
Oh, yes. Wow.
The science magazine owned and edited by Bob Guccione and Kathy Keaton, better known for owning Penthouse magazine.
Yeah,
this magazine was highly respected with some really interesting, science in it. And if my mother bought it, and if she knew it was published by the people who published Penthouse, she never would have bought it.
Right.
But, I used to read it, and I don't think I knew that till this moment. So.
Are you serious?
Yeah, no, I never knew.
You didn't
I
read
read it
the,
in.
you
I
didn't,
us't to read it in high school.
you didn't read The Masthead ever? We probably would. If you
Well,
didn't
I'll
read
put it this
Penthouse, you
way.
wouldn't know the names. Okay.
Right.
All right.
Even if I did read The Masthead, I would not have known at that age who Bob Guccione was. I think the
Right.
first time I ever heard anything about him, it was because of the Vanessa Williams in
Yeah.
Penthouse scandal
Yeah.
with George Burns.
On the
Oh
cover.
God, she's nude, right? That was I was a kid then, and that's the first I really ever heard of that stuff. But so I wouldn't have known.
So anyway, Omni ran from 78 through 97 when his magazine empire completely collapsed. Omni was a one-of-a-kind venture, but you know what? That one's missed by a lot of people. It was really a literate, smart magazine and beautiful, slick paper, great layouts, totally professional. That was nice. Do you guys agree, or did you ever read it? Either of you?
I did. I used to read it in high school a bit because, in fact, actually, if I remember right, even in junior high school, I remember the teacher recommending it, actually, the science teacher saying, like, if you want to learn more about science, like, this is the best magazine to look at about science. And sometimes when we would have to do reports and things on scientific subjects, I would cut articles out of Omni to use in my report. So I probably went through, I would say, like 7th, 8th grade. I was definitely reading it. Yeah.
Yeah. It was tremendous. A couple of women's magazines I just put on. I was surprised to find out that Mademoiselle is no longer in business. Both of my mother and sister used to read that. It died in 2001. Martha Stewart Living died in 2022.
Yeah, my sister used to work on that magazine.
Did you really? Wow.
Yeah.
I have a few more things here, but I want to Look magazine, guys. Look magazine from 1937 to 1971. One of the photographers was Stanley Kubrick,
yes,
the famous film director. Great photography, great photojournalism, was a mainstay in our house. And I believe here in this apartment, we still have a couple of old issues. I think we have one with John F. Kennedy on the cover.
Can I say one thing about Look?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, you've seen, I think, Bob, when you were here, you saw I have an issue with Jackie Onassis on the cover, which I found at a flea market, and it's in my basement area. But that the Stanley Kubrick thing. So Stanley Kubrick, he started out as a photographer before he was a movie director, and he did stuff for Look. And there's a whole photo shoot he did on pro wrestling. He went to, I think he went to Chicago to the amphitheater, or when wrestling was really big out of Chicago in the 50s. And he took pictures of everybody, Gorgeous George, all this amazing stuff of the crowd. And I found out about this because I used one or two of the photos in Pro Wrestling FAQ, my book from 10 years ago, because they were made available through the Library of Congress for free. But he did a whole wrestling layout for Look.
I never knew that.
I didn't know it either. Wow, that hit me over the head with a shovel. That's amazing.
Well, I was amazed when I saw the name because it said photos by Stanley Kubrick.
Yeah,
Stanley Kubrick. It's a photo of Gorgeous George. What are you talking about?
Same guy. Yeah. Amazing. Steve, any more oldie but goodies?
Yeah, I just think we have to go back to Lampoon again, just for the fact that, I mean, I'm a huge Howard Stern fan, and the impact that Lampoon had on him, I mean, that was one of his main influences, I think. And of course, they influenced the movies with the Lampoon movies that came out, but other kind of adult comedies of the early 80s were influenced by National Lampoon, I'm sure. And I mean, Howard Stern, I mean, the career that he's had, and just the doors that National Lampoon broke down so he could be that irreverent, wild man that he was. You got to give the magazines credit for that too.
I mean, basically, National Lampoon, Saturday Night Live, SCTV. That was 70s, 80s humor. Like, that was it. Those three entities basically created it.
What do you miss the most? I'll tell you at the end, but which ones do you miss the most, you guys, of the ones that are no longer around? Steve, why don't you start? What do you really miss from, I guess, growing up and reading magazines?
Well, just like with something that we all love, Dave Meltzer and the Observer. I miss getting any issue of any magazine where it's like I hold it in my hand and I realize I'm about to learn something. I'm about to have my my mind expanded. I'm about to really, learn something more about something that really matters to me. I mean, that's how I felt when I got Brian's book on Monsoon. It's like, here I have something I've been waiting for months. I'm opening it up, and with each chapter, I'm learning more, and I'm enjoying the process of learning. And we used to do that all the time with these magazines, when Cinefantastique or Entertainment Weekly or the Street and Smith Yearbook or Ring Wrestling, all those things. You'd buy them, you take them home, you sit down in your easy chair, you read them, and it's like, man, I'm having a good time with this. And you read it all the way through. You probably put it down. A day or two goes by, you go back to it again, you read it through again. I mean, you wonder, like, when John and I are going through all that minutia on the podcast, like, how do I remember all that stuff? It's because we would reread it time and time again. And it's just, that's how good this stuff was. And now, yeah, I love going on the internet. I love checking my websites I go to. I love hearing what happened last night or what's going on today, but you can't get that immediacy of the magazine in front of you and you're holding it and you own it. And, what do you fellas think?
I miss, it's similar to what Steve said. And yeah, I do agree. And I'll add to that, if you had a magazine subscription, how exciting the moment would be. You open up your mailbox and your new issue is there.
Yeah.
I get that way because I write for PWI and Inside the Ropes. And so they send me every issue. I look in my mailbox every day, hoping that one of them will be in there on that day.
Right.
And it's always just bills and junk. But except for 2 days out of 30 a month. But, no, but what I miss, similar to what Steve said, because my favorite magazines I've mentioned already, other than there was one that I'll just quickly mention. It was a comic-based magazine called The Savage Sword of Conan that Marvel put out.
I remember
which was like, it was magazine size, so they were unrestricted by the comics code. And so Conan was just chopping people to pieces, blood everywhere. Conan's constantly hooking up with all the slave girls and things. So I loved that one. But aside from the favorites, it was the fun of going to the newsstand and not even knowing what you were going to get. Right. Just looking, not even going there going, I got to get the new issue of whatever. Just going there and saying, I'm going to see what's out. What's going to grab my attention? That's why I still love going to bookstores. I love buying things in person because sometimes I don't know what I want. I like to look at stuff. And so I would do that. And even today, and even though it's so sad and anemic, anytime I have a chance, if I pass by the most rinky-dink little magazine rack in a sad little store, I'll still look at it and go, I wonder what they have. And invariably, it's all just magazines about knitting and baking cookies and stuff. Right. But, right. That's all they got now. But I still have that instinct of, magazines. I wonder what they got. That's what I miss.
I remember... I can remember the day I was doing something with my mom and dad. My dad was working, but across the street from where my dad had his flower shop, there was this little old-fashioned, like, it was like a 7-Eleven, but it was all family-owned. But they had like tons of magazines. They had, lotto tickets, candy, stuff like that, newspapers. And I'm going in there. And again, like he just said, you don't know what you're going to find, So there was a little area where they usually had the sports magazines, and they usually had plenty of wrestling magazines. And I go and pick up the issue of The Wrestler that had Bruno punching Stan Hansen from Shea Stadium. And this is the first I knew of, like, well, whatever happened in that match? You had no idea what happened in that match. There's pictures from Shea Stadium of Bruno pounding on Stan Hansen. And it's like, I felt like I won the lotto. I felt like this is $1 million thing in my hands, and I'm like smiling from ear to ear. My parents were looking at me like, what happened to you, son? And it's like, I just got to get home with this magazine intact, and it just, I mean, those are happy times. That's like 49 years ago, but it feels like yesterday. It's funny.
That's right. Well, as for me, guys, you know what I miss most about magazines? Buying them. Could you imagine how much it costs today? We'll just let me start with this. I used to, throughout my entire life, buy not one magazine. I'd buy 3 or 4 magazines, and it didn't even pinch financially. I could go in. The biggest magazine store I knew of where I lived was in Albany. It was called Central News on Central Avenue. It was a giant magazine store. They had everything. So I could buy the Kaiser books. I could buy an Argosy. I could buy, SI or Inside Sport, anything I wanted. And that stack of magazines would cost me $4, $4.50,
Wow.
maybe.
Wow.
I miss that because, like I said, I was always a reader, comic books first, into other things. And magazines I wanted magazines more than once I turned 13, I just loved magazines and reading the most. It was my main hobby. And I think it made me the writer I later became. But the thing is, I miss that feeling of going, let's go get some magazines. I met my wife in 1994 in Queens here, and there was a big place in Forest Hills that was a big magazine store. It's not there anymore. The store's there, the magazines aren't. And we used to go in and buy a stack of magazines, Time or whatever else looked interesting. We would grab a stack of magazines. I miss it more than I could say. And I don't want to be corny, but words can't describe the enjoyment the magazines have brought me in my life, both working on them and being just a reader. And I'll leave it at that.
Well said, Bob.
Brian, you were about to say something.
Well, you made me think of something when you mentioned Time, because Time magazine, because even that magazine seems to have turned into a pamphlet now, and Life magazine is gone, and those used to be the two giants. And in fact, this tells you anything you need to know about the changing relevance of magazines, because the company today that is known today as Warner Brothers Discovery, at last I checked, I don't know, it changes all the time.
Right.
Before that, they were Warner Media. Before that, they were called Time Warner. And the reason they were called Time Warner was that the Warner Brothers Company, which was owned by, I lose track of this damn thing, I think at that time was already owned by Ted Turner. So the Warner Brothers Company merged with Time Life, and it became Time Warner. But Time Life was this gigantic media corporation based in New York, and they published the two biggest magazines in America, and so they were considered important enough that they merged with Warner Brothers and they became Time Warner. And now they just gave up on that, the time part. Somebody at some point looked at the name and said, Time Warner, what do we even care about time anymore? Let's just call it Warner Media. And because it's irrelevant. Time magazine is now a relic, even though it still exists. But that transformation, to me, it showed me that magazines are just totally out of the mainstream now.
Well, Life magazine still exists as the occasional supermarket special on an end cap.
Yes.
There's no Life magazine in itself. But can you imagine, my friends, there was a Time Life building in Manhattan.
Yeah,
right.
That's what I mean.
A building full of people who produce these magazines.
Yeah. And they had a book line. They had all those series of hardcover books on whatever subject you could buy. Yeah. The Time Life series on the Old West, World War II, that kind of thing.
The great newspapers had a building. I used to work across from the Daily News building. I just, God, it breaks my heart. It just does. I'm sorry. I could not imagine as a child.
Well, people
the stuff
always
that I would mainly buy would be those things, and they stopped existing.
The criticism I always get whenever I wax nostalgic about these things, which I do a lot, is people say to me, well, things change, the world changes, you can't get stuck in the past, and, old things are replaced by new things. And I'll always say to them, yeah, but how come it's always worse?
Right.
Yeah. How come the thing, and even they don't have an answer for that. How come the thing that comes after is almost never better than the thing before? That's why I complain and get nostalgic and grumpy all the time, because it just feels like everything's just getting worse and not better. So that's my soapbox.
I will emphasize it with this point. What you do, Brian, and what I have done as writers and editors is slowly being siphoned away by AI. And recently, I think it was in the country chart, a country digital chart, where an AI artist, a fictitious name and fake music made by AI, reached number 1 on the Billboard chart.
I heard that. Yeah,
I could vomit.
There was also an AI. I don't even refer to these things as when people say an AI singer, an AI actor. Right. It's not a singer or actor. I mean, it's software. There was an AI created R&B singer too, I think, that charted. Here's one thing I'll say about that, and I don't know if it's just magical thinking or an overabundance of optimism. I follow that sort of thing closely because, again, it's partly my field. I'm not saying that it's going to go away or it's a temporary thing, but I do think it's a bubble that's going to burst to a certain degree. I don't think it's going to develop in the way that's being predicted. I think it's going to be one of those things where years from now, people will go, you remember when everybody thought AI was going to take over the world? Like, I think it's going to be that sort of thing. I think it will settle into becoming a part of our life, a part of the world, but not in the sense that gloom and doom kind of people are proclaiming. I just think we're putting way too much stock in it. It's almost like the .com bubble, and it is going to burst. And because it's a lot of it is the emperor's new clothes. And I know that these things improve and get better, but I still think that you'll never get away from the whole emperor's new clothes aspect of it. And as far as what people are willing, how much time people are willing to devote to it, I think there's going to be a wall that's reached with it. And I think we're approaching it.
I hope you're right, because human beings need to rub up against each other, be it physically or on the printed page.
Mm-hmm.
I really mean that. I don't mean to be philosophical, but I think it's important. If you take the human element out of anything, it's not as good. I rest my case. Boy, we got heavy, didn't we? No,
Sure
but
did.
you know what? Let us give thanks for the great memories we did have, though, collecting magazines and comic books and wrestling stuff and whatever other hobbies you may have. Life is short, and I want everybody out there to embrace what you like and do what you love, right, guys?
That's right.
Absolutely.
Steve, what do you got coming up, man? What's going on with you? Talk about anything that's going on in your professional life, if you'd be so kind.
In the world of podcasts, I'm going to be on Tony Richards' show this week. Again, I don't know when Bob's show is coming out, but I'm on the Tony Richards' show from time to time, Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. And then, of course, John and I come out every Friday with our show, Stick to Wrestling, and it comes out usually in the afternoon, macadampod.com. And I'm a big fan of Brian's podcast and Bob's podcast as well. Shut Up and Wrestle. I love hearing Brian's son every week as he kicks off every episode. And I was going to tell you, Brian, I don't know if you like this idea. I mean, your son is about the age that I was when I discovered Norman Rockwell. Maybe you should show him some of those pictures and see what he thinks about it. Maybe he'll think it's old and goofy, but maybe he'll like them. I don't know.
You never know. I mean, I've taken him to art museums, so he might be interested. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
And Brian, please hype away anything you got going on. You're a preeminent writer and podcaster, and anything that's going on, please let us know.
Well, one thing I'll say is we talked about Irresistible Force at the beginning. And so a lot of people ask me this. I know the book is widely available now. It's out. But if people want a signed copy of the book, Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, I have a pretty decent stock now in here. I was able to do that finally. And so people can reach out directly to me. My email address is brianrsolomon@yahoo.com. They can also find me on Twitter or Instagram at Brian R. Solomon. There's our Facebook group, Shut Up and Wrestle with Brian R. Solomon. So I'm very easy to reach if people want an autographed copy of the book. So, and to clarify, because I had someone actually ask me this, no, the book is not autographed by Gorilla Monsoon. Someone asked me this. The book is autographed by me. So just to clear that up. So that's the big thing, I guess, right now that I'm talking about. And also I'm debating what my next book is going to be because people ask me that. And it's really up in the air. It might be something non-wrestling related. It's just I don't have anything fully to announce yet. Oh, and one last thing is that the audio book for Irresistible Force comes out December 2nd. So I know people are curious about that one. And
I was going to ask you about that.
Yes,
that
December
was really
2nd.
on my mind when you said that.
And it's me. I'm the narrator. So I think people prefer it that way. So to have the actual author narrating the book. So
absolutely. Magazines, guys. I'd like to say support print publishing as best you can. However, like these gentlemen said, that most magazines now are like 6 pages. So it's like, I don't know. But you know what? There are ways to support the industry that aren't buying magazines. You can buy them in digital format And there are companies and sites where you can literally read the magazine as it's printed, which keeps the magazine industry going. One is called Readly, Readly, and it has magazines from all over the world in PDF form. Click on the magazine and it scrolls. If you have a nice big computer screen, it's just like read the magazine. I am wholeheartedly for that. I was a newsman. I was a magazine guy. I want to see the industry stay alive, both of them. So anything you can do to help in that regard and have some fun in the meantime, I suggest you do that. That's my only editorial today. Steve Gennarelli, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Brian R. Solomon, always a pleasure.
You're very welcome, as always.
See you guys soon. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with the elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, there you have it. Another edition of the Outdated Entertainment Hour is done. We hope you enjoyed it. We really had fun putting that one together. Old magazines, man. 75 cents would buy a magazine. $1. Maybe less. First magazine, full-size magazines I ever remember buying were 60 cents. But then again, I'm older than every brand of detergent. Well, in any event, we hope you enjoyed the look back at publications. Write to us, outdatedent, that's outdatedent at gmail.com. Our website, outdatedentertainment.buzzsprout.com. We can hear all of our previous episodes in one spot. Here's the easiest way to find us. I always say, type in Bob Smith, Outdated Entertainment. It will come right up and give you a variety of places to listen to our podcast. Both the Outdated Entertainment Hour and the Outdated Wrestling Hour are productions of Bob Smith Podcasts. That's it for now. In about another 3 weeks' time to a month, we will have another new show for you on a whole different topic. If you have any topics ideas, let us know. We might be able to fulfill your wishes. We really do appreciate you listening to every episode. I started this podcast, 2 years ago now? Because I just enjoyed the first one I was doing so much. I figured I'll do another one on a different topic. And the topic about this, and the topic for this podcast is anything entertainment-wise that's fondly remembered. I hope you fondly remember this episode about magazines. My name's Bob Smith, and until next time, in the words of Ringo Starr, words that never go out of style as far as I'm concerned, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.